Today on With the First Pick, we'll check in on the rookie QB class now that OTAs and minicamps are a wrap. By the way, Rick, training camp starting less than a month for some teams. We'll also hit on some headlines from around the league and maybe even answer a mailbag question. We'll see. I'm Ryan Wilson. That's Rick Spielman. This is episode 164. And Rick, before we get going, let's see if the old countdown board works. How many days until the 2025 NFL draft?
Well, it's Juneteenth, so we're celebrating a holiday today. And there are, Ryan, if you didn't know this, and Harry, the producer, didn't know this, there are 309 days left until the 2025 NFL draft. And we haven't even started summer scouting school yet. So I'm anxious to get started on that because that clock is ticking.
Be careful what you ask for because that's a coming. So a little preview about that. That'll come on the Monday of July 4th week. Rick and we'll be joined by Mike Renner, new CBS hire. We'll talk quarterbacks there and another sneak peek. We'll each come up with our top 10s, come together separate. Do our top 10s come together, and then we'll compare our top 10s. I'm sure, Rick, you won't have any comments on those.
None whatsoever. I'll just go back to my role as scout in the corner.
Scout in the corner. By the way, if you missed it, great episode last week. We were joined by Rick's brother, Chris Spielman, the Ohio State great, the Lions great, and he's currently in Detroit's front office, and he played a huge role in reshaping that franchise. And he talked about all that and then some. Rick, it was one of our most popular episodes ever. Non-mock draft episodes, it's number one. And Debo, who has broken up with us and refuses to take our calls, but he will answer the occasional email, told me 13,000 hours people watched that episode in the span of 6 days.
Jeez, if my wife and his wife knew that,
they'd be like, why?
What? Why? Yeah.
Why?
What are they getting? So, yeah, no, when we get together, we do have a lot of fun. And in the past, when I was in the front office and he was in the media, I always took some time to do shows with him, especially in June when there's nothing really going on. But we can rely. That's when blood is thicker than water, they say. And you can rely on your family members to come to the rescue during the off times of the NFL season.
Yeah, Lions fans were incredibly excited. I was looking around to see what folks were saying. I saw one Lions fan in the comments said he watched the show 2 times already. He was so excited about because I guess, Chris, I didn't know this, and you probably knew this because he's your brother, but he doesn't talk a lot to the media, so fans don't have a real idea. Right, so they have no real sense for what's going on behind the scenes. And it was like he just opened up the cookie jar, and it was all-you-could-eat cookie buffet. So apparently, Lions fans didn't know what villain meant, so he sort of explained that, and that was a headline for some Lions blogs. So that was interesting, and of course, people were blown away that in your line of work, and you know this, he had no interest in being the top dog. He's like, I want to make sure this organization gets to where it needs to go, and that certainly makes things easier for everybody else when you know that someone's not coming for your job, because you've seen organizations where you hire somebody and it's all Game of Thrones time. So none of that.
Yeah, but if that's happening, then you've hired the wrong person.
Right.
And
yeah,
like he talked about what Dan Campbell does, I always try to apply this as well. I want to hire people that are good enough to take over my job, but also do not have an ego. And it's not a Game of Thrones.
Right.
All they're interested in, we all have one common goal, and that's try to win a championship. And when you can put a group of people together like that are very talented, but yet their ego is put aside and their goal is the same as your goal, and one common goal is to win a championship regardless of your role in that organization, that's the most important thing. And that's why the Detroit Lions, and when they put Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell together, have had the success that they have. But don't forget, I think the whole key coming out of this was Sheila Ford Hemp and what she's done since she's taken over as the steward of that organization.
Yeah, no, so it's a great listen. And I encourage people to check that out in the old podcast feed if you haven't yet, or go rewatch it like some of the Lions fans did. One of the things that I found funniest, Rick, and I told my wife this, she's like, oh my God, I can't, but that doesn't even make sense. One blog post thought that you were Chris's dad. Tell Chris that. So it said Rick Spielman, Chris's father, and Ryan Wilson had someone referred to me as Ryan Williams. So they got the Chris Spielman part right. That's all that matters.
Do I look like his dad? Are you kidding me? I look way younger than he does, even though he's my younger brother.
He had the hat on, so that he did the Ryan Wilson smart thing. You got to cover up the dome, and had a lipper in. So anyway, that was awesome. Thanks for setting that up, Rick. I'm glad that Chris owed you a couple because that worked out well for us. Learned a lot. Check that out in the old podcast feed. All right, just me and you today. The old band's back together. Just going to talk a little. I mean, it's the middle of June. Everyone's gone home. Do you give a speech to the team, or do you have the coaches do it about stay out of trouble?
No, coaches do that. That's their responsibility. I know that they have these next 4 to 5 weeks off, whatever, depending on when they report back to training camp. But the biggest part is that just make smart decisions. We've gotten this far.
Right.
You're going to be off. Now. Yeah. Be mature. As you say, you're going to make decisions in life. Make sure you're making the right ones, because not only you're representing the team, but you're representing yourself too. And as much as a general manager tries to get away during the summertime and take these couple weeks off, you just always have your phone by your side, because you never know. And every day, please, can I have one day where I don't have to deal with anything related to football?
In the I don't know if they're rare, but in the moments where you miss being in the league and then you find yourself out on the golf course or the pickleball court not having to answer phones, does that bring you back to why you're retired?
Yeah, but I still have to answer my wife's calls.
Yeah, that's different though.
Yeah.
You even you'll text me and say I'm crushing some old man in golf. I'll call you back. So at least you do that. But it's not like life or death.
No, yeah. It's different problems. But yeah, a lot easier.
They're called rich people problems, Rick.
Well, you have rich people problems.
Do I?
A guy. Yeah, I'm just a scout in the corner here. Just
I didn't know.
Trying to put 2 nickels together to make a dime every now and then.
That's right. That's right. All right, let's talk a little football here. Let's start in Chicago, where I would imagine Ryan Poles is extremely excited as the general manager that had a big hand in putting this team together, especially given where they were even a year ago. They have their franchise quarterback in Caleb Williams. He's had his up and downs in minicamp and OTAs. I would imagine I care very little. Do you also care very little about the mistakes he's making at this point, because that's sort of what you want to see?
Yeah, that's what you want to see.
Right.
Because a lot of times it's the first time these quarterbacks are getting in a huddle. It's the first time they have to spit out language on calling a play. Most of the time when they're coming out of college, all it is hand signals or looking over to the sideline. Now, then some of these calls can be very lengthy, and you have to be able to pronounce what the hell the play is so everybody in the huddle can understand. It's not only just calling the pass play, let's say, or the run play. You're calling out the protection, you're calling out the formation, you're calling out the motions. So there is a lot to learn, and a lot to learn how to communicate that to people in a huddle. Then you get up there. Now you got a cadence that you got to worry about. And is it on 1? Is it on 2? Is it a hard count? And then after that, then you got to execute the play and learning the offensive playbook. And it sounded like they're feeding him with a fire hose right now, wanted to get the whole offense in during this OTAs. And by doing that, you can see what he can handle and what he can't handle, and how much will he be able to retain once he gets away for a little bit when you come back and report to that training camp. But on top of all that, then you got defenses, NFL defenses, that are doing crazy things on the defensive side of the ball with different disguises, with different blitz packages, where pressures are coming from. So it is overwhelming sometimes for any young rookie quarterback coming in compared to what they had to deal with in college.
The other thing is, and you talked about this a lot last year, they sort of did the fire hose thing with CJ Stroud in Houston, and then they dialed it back a little bit. So I think you start off with like high level calculus, and then you dial it back to algebra if you need to, but you see how far down that road you could get before maybe you feel a little overwhelmed. Because we talked in the preseason about how CJ looked like a rookie, and I think week 1 was the Baltimore game. Is that right? I think the Ravens.
Yeah.
Whatever his week 1 game is, he struggled a little bit, and then Bobby Slowick and CJ got on the same page, and then it started to click.
Yeah, well, they dialed back the protections. This made it more simple for him to get the pre-snap reads, and then more simple for him if player A ain't open, float to player B.
Yeah.
And it's 1-2. That's it. You don't have to go through this side of the field, that side of the field. And the more they get repetitions at it, the better they get at it. So, but the only way you're going to learn is to throw them out there, especially during these OTAs and mini camps, and just give them as much as you can give them to see what they can retain, to see what they learn. They get this all on tape. So when you go and you have these meetings after practice and you're reviewing the film, then you can see, hey, Caleb, look at where you looked at. It should have been over to this side because the safety rotated down on the left side. Go to the right.
Mm.
So all the things that they didn't have to do in college or as much in college. And like I said, it's learning a whole new language. And the whole offense is learning a new offense because they have a new offensive coordinator as well. So that's going in. Not only is he learning, but everybody else is learning as well.
So Terry and Arnold, Jackson Powers Johnson were two of your favorite interviews at the combine. Is Caleb? He's top 5 probably. I think JJ McCarthy's probably up there. I thought Caleb was engaging.
Caleb was, yeah, I think people, whatever impression they have of him, but when you get with him face to face and you actually sit down and talk with him, I think he surprises people because they have an impression or some kind of predetermined, this is who he is. And then when you sit down and talk with him, it's something totally different than what you expected.
Yeah, I'm asking that because obviously when you talk to these guys as a GM, you're spending more than 5 minutes with them, typically. Maybe sometimes not. But he was smarter than I thought. And again, that's just based on what we see on television and social media. I didn't think he was an idiot, but he came across as genuine, and I thought he was really sharp. And I was going to ask you your first impressions when you meet players. Have you ever been so surprised that you were wrong about a player, whether good or bad? Or typically do you have a good sense for who a player is based on that sort of interaction?
You kind of have a background
That's
and you have all this information on a player, so you kind of expect
Hmm.
what's coming into your room. But I always try to, and you've been around me for a couple years now, and you know how I screw around before they even come up
Oh,
on a
that's true.
stage, is to get them to loosen up. I just want to know you as a person. I don't want this rehearsed robot.
Hmm.
As you prepared for these interviews, I want to get to know you just as a person. So sometimes when you can screw around and me with a bad dad joke or something here or
Or trying
there,
to tear Jackson Powers Johnson's ACL with a chest bump.
yeah, well, that's his fault. He should have had a lower base.
Get low. That's
But
true.
those are the things, yeah, you'd get their
Yeah.
guard down and get to know them as people.
You're good at that. I will say. Have you tried that towards me yet or not yet? Well, you
No,
holding?
no,
Yeah.
no,
Waiting.
no, I
All right.
probably won't either.
By the way, for people listening and
How do you
watching,
think I my wife married me? That took me about 6 months to break through that wall.
you had to turn on the Spielman charm on that one for long term.
Well, I guess the first time I met her and told her I was going to marry her, that's not an opening line that you want to start out with. When
Oh, you
you
came out
say
hot like with that?
I came out the gate strong.
And that what year in college was that?
Sophomore year in college.
Oh, you knew what
It's
was up.
yeah, this Friday coming up our 37th wedding
Holy
anniversary.
crap. How about that? Congratulations.
Yeah, and I'm not actually on a golf trip, so that was something that I did not see coming. I forgot. I didn't
Still
put the 2 and 2 together.
still got it. Well, congratulations on 37 years.
If we
That's
can
something.
get over the 40-year hump, then I think I'm in the clear.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, Rick. Don't count those chickens just yet. Congratulations, though. 37. That's a big. I'll be 37 in a couple years, as far as you know. All right, let's talk about. We're going to take a break here in a second, but first, let's talk about Rome Odunze, the other first-round pick. And here's something I want to mention, Rick, because this is. I want to ask you this: how would you react now in this day and age where every team has their video unit and they're putting stuff on social media and YouTube and all that other stuff? And I know you had your hand in that when you were at Minnesota later because it wasn't a thing earlier. But the Bears put out, or maybe it was on they allowed it to be released. I'm sure it's something to do with it. But Roku had a show called NFL Draft to pick his in. And there's a clip of Ryan Poles calling Terry Fontenot, the Falcons GM, The Bears took Rome Odunze at 9. The Falcons picked at 8. They obviously took Michael Penix Jr. But Ryan Poles called Terry Fontenot and asked him, hey, what do you think about letting me trade up one spot? I'll give you a 4th-round pick. That's what the Bears and the Eagles had done last year in the 9-10 range, because the Eagles came up and got Jalen Carter, and the Bears moved down for one spot to get Darnell Wright, their starting right tackle. Terry said, no, we're good. They ended up taking Michael Penix Jr. But he was so concerned, Ryan Poles was, about losing out on Rome Odunze for another team coming up to 8. I don't think he thought the Falcons were going to do it. But would you, and he said his assistant GM, Ian Cunningham, actually talked him out of it, just said, stay the course. I thought it was interesting for a couple of reasons. One is that if your board's set, your board's set. So why do you think he was wavering there? Or maybe that was part of the conversation. We might trade up for Rome Odunze.
I think that's the part of the job that's exciting, because those are like game time decisions like a coach has to make or a player has to make on Sundays. The only scenario that I can come up with, well, there are a lot of scenarios I can come up with, but my first draft, it was, do we move up one spot to get Adrian Peterson, or do we sit there and let him fall to us? And we were dealing with the Washington Redskins at the time. And I have the ownership breathing down my neck because we wanted to get Adrian Peterson. And I was like, we ended up holding and did not make that trade to swap up. And I was like, God, if Adrian Peterson goes before we pick, this might be my only draft with the Minnesota Vikings. And it worked out where Adrian fell to us, and the rest is history. But that's the exciting part, I would say, is that you got to know, what was that Kenny Rogers song? You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold.
Yep.
And those are the things that were the most exciting part of the job, was operating on that clock on draft day, trying to go up and get a player, or staying or moving back, hoping to still get the same player. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But that's what you do all that prep work for, and go through all those scenarios before the draft.
Do you remember who Washington took at number 6 before you were on the clock at number 7?
The safety from LSU.
LaRon Landry. I tell you what, man, they made a mistake there, obviously, but the picks that went before them, Calvin Johnson went second to Detroit, and Joe Thomas went third to Cleveland, both Hall of Famers. Adrian Peterson will be a Hall of Famer one day. And then a few picks later, Patrick Willis went to the 49ers. He's a Hall of Famer. Darrelle Revis at 14 went to the Jets. He's a Hall of Famer. So you got the right one. Who would you have taken if Adrian had been drafted? Or would you have been fired already?
Yeah, just been fired.
Had a good run.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I mentioned that because I thought that was interesting, and I appreciate the fact that they put it out there. I don't know if Ryan Poles wanted that out there, but it's out there now. And then Rome Odunze's role, obviously the quarterback position is the hardest to learn coming in. How difficult is it to learn coming from – Kalen DeBoer runs a pretty pro-style offense. What's the transition going to be like for Rome Odunze?
I think it'll be, because if he's working in the slot, because we've seen him in the slot, we've seen him outside. It depends on where they end up lining him up and what his role is, especially when they went and got Keenan Allen, when you got DJ Moore, you got DeAndre Swift, you got Cole Kmet. So you have a bunch of different combinations. So it'll depend on what kind of role that he ends up carving out for himself. And I'm sure they know how talented he is, that they're going to figure out how to get the ball in his hands and share the wealth.
Yeah, this team, I mean, we've said it a bunch since the draft, but rarely has a quarterback, maybe never, come into a situation so good offensively and defensively. Like, sometimes you get a good defense as a rookie if you're Joe Flacco coming in, or Ben Roethlisberger back in the day. But this offense is stacked too, and I think the transition, the expectations will be high, but I think
you're going to have to be patient, because this is a whole new offense, new offensive coordinator. Now, the defense, I thought that last 6 or 7 games when Matt Eberflus took over as a defensive play caller, that was a top 10 defense the way they were playing. They struggled early in the season. Then once Coach Eberflus took over, I thought they played extremely well on defense. Now some of the pieces they added, they got the corner locked up for a long-term deal. So, yeah. The trade for Sweat was a big trade for them. I still think they're missing an edge rusher on the other side.
They traded back up into the 4th, I believe, for our guy Austin Booker.
But he's not ready. He's a developmental guy.
Yep.
So, but with this defense, hopefully can carry this team until the offense starts clicking, And that may take, 3-4 games before you really see this offense get going.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Expectations going to be high in Chicago for the first time in a long time. All right, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some more of these rookies, including the rookie quarterbacks. And Rick, we're going to take a stroll down memory lane, too. I'm going to looking back and see what we were all talking about 12 months ago with the expectations for last year's rookie class and see if we can draw any comparisons from that right after this.
Football action continues. Are you ready for this? Ready to take chances? As the gridiron is taken over by the Great White North. It's time to storm the fortress. It's time to fight on the battlefield. Catch the Canadian Football League on CBS Sports Network.
All right, Rick, before we talk about the Drake Maye and J.J. McCarthy and Jayden Daniels, the Bo Nixes of the world, here's what we were saying collectively as the media a year ago. This is sort of funny. This is what NFL reporter Jeremy Fowler of ESPN said last mid-June. Poise is the word you hear often when you talk to people about in Carolina about Bryce Young, his decision-making. When he walks into the field, he never looks rushed. Everything feels pretty smooth. His energy is always good. And I was told his intermediate to deep ball, whether on air or against the defense, has been pretty good. Like he's placing them in the right spots in between in the small space where you need to fit it in. He's been good so far. And I think all that's true, but I think the reality is you rarely hear anything bad about these quarterbacks this time of year. And then when the rubber meets the road, it could go any number of ways.
Right. And even when we talked about Caleb and some of his struggles during this time of year, but, remember, there's no pads on. There's no one coming after you knowing you're going to get hit. So we got a long ways to go. This is, as they say, in shorts and T-shirt football, but we got a long ways to go before they line up in week 1.
Yeah, a year ago, C.J. Stroud was battling Davis Mills for the starting job. Gardner Minshew and Anthony Richardson were battling it out in Indianapolis. Both C.J. and Anthony won the jobs. Anthony got hurt early on. So just something to keep in mind if you hear all the great things. And we weren't even talking about Will Levis because at one point, Malik Willis had passed him on the depth chart. Will got hurt during training camp and preseason, so he didn't play a lot. And then, of course, he came on at the end, and he's going to be the starter there with Brian Callahan, now the head coach. All right, Drake Maye's the number 3, 2, best case. Jacoby Brissett is the starter. I think that's been made clear. How long, we'll find out, but I think it's a smart decision. What happens if you start 1-5? Do you rush it or do you have a plan over the summer and you stick with it?
I think you have a plan, but if you're 1-5, at what point do you say, okay, let's get the rookie in there and get him going?
What if he struggles with just still getting the offense under his belt and feeling comfortable?
Well, if he's not ready to go, then you just, stay the course and suck it up. But because once you make that switch to the rookie, if you bench that rookie, then you're done.
Right.
It's like that hunting dog. If you go out there and he looks great running through the fields and pointing and doing everything else, and then all of a sudden that gun goes off and the damn dog runs, and it's because he's gun shy.
What's your comfortable hunting dog that quit on you?
That was Gretel. We got Gretel, who was a German short hair pointer, out of the pound. And we took her out in the fields. And when I was living up in Ohio, and she looked great. I mean, she was like a show pony running around pointing.
She was Bryce Young in training camp.
He was Bryce Young in training camp. All of a sudden, we shot a gun, and next mile and a half, we're running around trying to find that dog. It buried itself in a rabbit hole.
I did?
Yeah. So it was myself and my dad, and we're walking back to the car about a mile and a half away. He's got the damn dog on his shoulders. She's shaking like a dog crapping razor blades. I got 2 shotguns looking like Elmer Fudd walking through the woods. That's all, folks.
You know what's funny? That the dog's a hunting dog, but it forced you to hunt her.
Yeah.
So you
That's all we spent. We spent the next hour and a half looking for the damn dog that buried itself in dug its way into a rabbit hole or something.
All right. So hopefully no hunting dogs. No Gretels in this draft class. But your point is that you can't rush them out there.
Right. And when they're ready, and then at some point you just say, if we're going to do it, we're going to go through some growing pains, but we're going to have to live with it, going forward from once we insert them.
I think I don't know. I'll ask you. I feel like college-wise, if you had to win one game, maybe you want Drake Maye over J.J. McCarthy, but I think J.J. McCarthy, if had to start someone on their current team, I would start J.J. in Minnesota over Drake in New England just because of what's around him. That said, I understand why you go with Sam Darnold because, again, no rush there. Who you starting if you need one guy to start?
Between those two?
Yeah.
Well, that's a kind of a hypothetical question that
You
I
love
hate.
hypotheticals, though.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why you ask me these
I keep
questions.
keep
Yeah,
asking.
and it keeps irritating me to death that you ask these. Whichever one I think is the most prepared coming out of OTA.
Whichever one's going to win the game.
Yeah.
Are you okay with JJ on the bench?
Yeah, I think when we talked about him, we thought that he was the one that maybe needed to sit. Both him and Maye were the ones that we didn't think were ready to step in right away. So I think they're in both situations are where they have an opportunity to sit and learn. Now, can Kevin O'Connell make Sam Darnold the Baker Mayfield success story that we saw last year with Dave Canales down in Tampa and resurrect his career? But my guess is when you looked at Minnesota's schedule, and it is a brutal schedule. I mean, they start out with the Giants in New York. Then I think they have San Francisco, Green Bay. I can't, then they go to play the Jets in London. Then they come back from London and have their bye week. So if they're 1-4 or under 500 or around 500, they make the switch to JJ McCarthy coming out of the bye when the Detroit Lions come into US Bank Stadium.
Man, did you know that off the top of your head, or are you looking at the schedule?
No, I know it off the top of my head. I try to study when we're not doing these podcasts. I try to read it as much as I can every day.
Were you studying on the golf course when I called you yesterday?
I do take a break every now and then.
You've earned it. Yep, you're right. At the Giants, San Francisco, Houston, at Green Bay, Jets, and then their bye week, and then they come out with the Detroit Lions. Whew, that's a tough road to hoe. That's my grandmother used to say.
So,
but again, we have no idea. Like we thought the Texans were going to win 3 games last year. We thought Davis Mills might start. No one knows. I do know that Sam Darnold's going to start the season, but how long is the question?
Yeah, and I'm saying that coming out of that bye and when Detroit comes into US Bank Stadium, that's going to be probably the most opportune time to start JJ McCarthy, unless Sam Darnold was playing like Baker Mayfield did last year and they're in the hunt.
All right, I'm going to ask you one more hypothetical before we move on. Who starts the longest, assuming everyone's 100% healthy? Jacoby Brissett in New England or Sam Darnold in Minnesota?
I'm Jacoby Brissett.
There you go. Was that so hard? All right, let's talk about a quarterback. I don't know why I keep asking these questions.
Because they're dumb. It is. It's really irritating, to be honest with you.
My dog's pulling your dog. He's barking upstairs. He didn't like that you called me dumb, or maybe he agrees with you calling me dumb. I don't know which one. Let's talk about a quarterback that is going to start, unless I missed the boat on this one. Jayden Daniels is QB1, correct?
Yeah, now, Dan Quinn did not announce him as a starter going into training camp, but there's no question that Jayden Daniels will be the starter. They signed Marcus Mariota as a backup quarterback, and we all know what he is. He's a backup at best. He's struggled every time he's had to start. New regime coming in, new GM, new head coach, new offensive coordinator. They'll do everything they can to get him prepared to start week 1.
So here's something that Dan said recently, talking about Jayden. He's further along than you probably should be, that's high praise for this time of year, even though you haven't seen him take a hit, because you can tell whether he knows the playbook or not. There's no doubt that Jayden's making unbelievable progress. It was really clear that he's put the work in. And Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator, added he has a really high football IQ. He understands protections. He's been really impressed. I've been really impressed by that. A lot of guys coming in the league, that's not an area they major in college. And part of me wonders how much of that has to do with the work that he did with the virtual reality stuff that we talked about a few weeks ago, in terms of just basically getting extra snaps when you may not get those snaps otherwise.
Yeah, anywhere you can steal reps because of the time limitations you have during the OTAs is going to be an advantage. And the one thing, and just reading through the clips on him showing up at 5:45 every morning to come in and maybe do that virtual reality, to get those extra reps, to do that extra study time, tells you how important it is to him on wanting to be a successful quarterback. Some guys think they could just come in the league and maybe just rely on their natural skills and athletic ability, but the NFL is a whole different level now. on what you're going to see on defense, the speed of the game, and the more reps you can get, whether on the field or with virtual reality or whatever you're looking at, hopefully the better you become.
And these veterans, Andrew Wiley, the offensive lineman, has been impressed with the way he's played in the pocket. Terry McLaurin, their best player at the wide receiver position, has been really impressed. And that's what you want to see, because sometimes, and you know this better than I do, a young player will come in and maybe they're not as vocal as perhaps they need to be, or maybe they're not putting in the work, whatever the case may be. It feels like Jayden Daniels is doing all the right things in addition to being really good on the football field.
It's yet to be determined. I mean, is anyone saying, you know, we have a horse crap football team coming out OTAs and minicamp, we're packing it in?
No.
So everybody's encouraged. Everybody's got a chance to win a Super Bowl. All 32 teams are still in it right now. So I don't know why anyone, or I've never heard anyone ever say that, hey, God, are we bad? This is going to be a rough year coming ahead.
Well, on that note, let's talk about Bo Nix in Denver, who, again, hasn't been named the starter, but it's him, Jared Stidham, Zach Wilson. It feels like Bo Nix is probably going to get an opportunity. Maybe Jared Stidham gets red hot in training camp. But let's hear some more positives about the rookie quarterbacks. His communication has been fantastic.
Yay.
So, too, was his accuracy. So there's that. One of the things that came out, and Davis Webb is the quarterback's coach there, the former, I think Davis went to Cal, the former Cal wide receiver, played a little bit in the league. A lot of the completions have been, the ball's been coming out on time at the top of the drop, 3-5 steps, whatever it is. But he did say, we don't want to be checked down Charlies. We want to be aggressive down the field. But if it's not there, we want to keep moving forward. And I think that feels like something we didn't see from Russ Wilson last year and what Sean Payton was looking for. And then we saw the frustration sometimes on the sidelines. So maybe check down Charlie isn't a bad place to start. Get the ball out, even if it's to your check down. And then, you know, what's the old saying? You're not going to go broke making a profit. So just get 1 or 2 yards and keep moving the chains. But to your point, he's not getting hit. There's no pass rush. You're laughing at.
Where'd you come up with that? I've never heard that before.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah. It must have been your financial background before you got as an NFL analyst.
Again, what did you say? You said I was a rich guy or something?
Uh-huh.
Rich guy problems? That's a rich guy problem.
Problems. That's a rich guy problem there.
I'm glad you like that. You can use it if you want.
No.
Never go broke making a profit, Rick.
No, I use my other ones.
Okay. But what about the notion of just getting back to basics? Does it matter? It's something different than what we saw with Russ and Sean last year, and just taking the available open wide receiver instead of pushing the ball down the field.
Yeah, well, that was an arranged marriage last year. This was, as some people have called it, a Sean Payton arrogant pick, because he saw something in Bo Nix that other people didn't see. So he's going to do everything he can and to make sure that this kid has success early. And a lot of that may be some short, quick hitting throws just to get the ball out of his hands, to limit some of the progressions and reads that he has to go through. So I'm anxious to see how he progresses during training camp and in some of these preseason games. I know no one gets excited about the preseason, but me and you love the preseason because we get an opportunity to first see these guys in actual game action.
Yeah, so I can overreact about how much I love Kenny Pickett.
Yeah.
Destroying the preseason. Listen, if Bo Nix wins the job, and feels like he's on that course, game 1 at Seattle, game 2 Pittsburgh, game 2 at Tampa, game 2 at New York Jets. So those are, and then game, 5 at Las Vegas with Max Crosby and that revamped Anthony Pierce team. So he's going to face a lot of good defenses. Not to say they can't win some of those games, but it's not a bunch of tomato cans.
No, and he's going to get tested early. So I'm sure that, and all these quarterbacks, it seems like even the Jayden Daniels, they're not sharing reps like JJ McCarthy. I don't know how many first-team reps he got, how many first-team reps Drake Maye got, because they plan on starting those veteran quarterbacks early. But if you're going to play your rookie quarterback, they better be getting as many reps as they possibly can with that first team.
And because of NFLPA rules, can you stay after practice on your own? Are there rules about taking first team reps?
There's no rules about taking first team reps as long as you're on.
Taking extra first team reps outside the structure of practice.
There's rules on how many hours you can be on the field.
Yeah.
And how many hours you can be in the classroom. So those are in place. But, you know, You just got to make sure you stay within the rules. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Yeah. We saw the Falcons just got charged, I think, a 5th-round pick for whatever the thing was with the
And
Kirk
so
Cousins.
Detroit got nailed too. They lost an OTA day, and that was more due to unnecessary contact because there should be no contact. Part of my job was to make sure that during our OTAs, that if there was incidental contact, that our photographer didn't take a picture of it and post it on our website.
Oh, that's how they find out.
Yeah. But no, the rule is that you'll get an email. I used to get an email from the league that said, hey, send me these 2 practice days, just a random check. So those 2 practice days, I'd call our video director, send it to the NFL. They also send it to the NFLPA. They'll go through the practice, see if there's any violations, and that's how you get nailed. But it's a random, just out of the blue. I'd come in on a Tuesday morning, hey, we need last week's practice. And
that's
so,
like the people in our neighborhood community that hire the old timers that are retired to drive around and see if there are any yard violations, just looking for stuff to ping you on.
well, that's, when you live in the high society neighborhood that you live in, and you got people making sure your yard's trimmed and cut.
Yeah. Well, joke's on them. My 17-year-old cuts the grass, and I told him the other day, I said, Kai, if you had one arm and one leg and were blind, and this is what the yard looked like, it would still look terrible. This is a terrible job.
How about my son? I had a postage stamp for a yard. It took him 2 hours to cut because he would do like 4 strips and then go take a break.
They're the same. Everyone's kids, especially boys, are the same. Like it's amazing.
You just stay task at hand. Well, Dad, Susie called me, so I had to go take that phone call.
Of course,
or hey,
Susie's more important than the yard.
Yeah. I can come back and do the other 3 strips in the next hour, and then the rest of the yard before it gets dark.
I said, Kai, the neighbors think I'm the one cutting the grass, and it looks like a psychopath cut it. What are we doing here? It's not hard. Back and forth, back and forth.
Just follow the wheel lines from the mower.
I think the lawnmower's broken. I can guarantee you the lawnmower's not broken. Get out there. All right. That's it on Bo Nix. Before we take a break, I want to ask you about the another sort of trade that almost was on draft day. I didn't mention it earlier because it really didn't fit with the Bears conversation, but this is the Rams. It's sort of funny that Les Snead and Sean McVay absolutely have to move up and down the draft board. So this came out as well. They were pick 19, the first time they've had a first-round pick in the Sean McVay era, going back to 2017 when he arrived there. And there's some clips that made their way around the old internets that showed Les calling Joe Douglas of the Jets. He wanted to trade up to pick 10 to get Brock Bowers. They were going to get Brock Bowers at 10. And Joe Douglas stayed put. He ended up trading down one spot, allowing the Vikings to come up and get J.J. McCarthy. And then he said, hey, how about 11? That didn't happen. Once Brock Bowers was off the board at 13, the Rams were interested in trying to get Byron Murphy to replace Aaron Donald. That didn't happen. He went to Seattle. And I don't want to say they settled, but they stayed put and got Jared Verse, and then they circled back up Braden Fisk in round 2. And I think they're probably pretty happy with that. But what about the notion of going up to get Brock Bowers at 10, reportedly?
Yeah, well, that's reportedly, and I didn't see those clips. So that's part of the business on draft day, trying to get aggressive, but not being too aggressive where you make a decision to just give your draft picks away. Just going off on another rabbit hole here. No pun intended to Gretel. God rest her soul. She was a great house dog. But where was I going with that? Oh, the Minnesota Vikings. If you look at what they gave up for J.J. McCarthy and what they gave up to move up to get Dallas Turner, they gave up because they dipped into the 2025 picks. They gave up an entire draft class to go get those 2 players. So they were very aggressive. And I think both those players would be very good players, but if they don't pan out and you gave up an entire draft class, then you're going to be looked at a little sideways.
Yeah. And again, we're not looking at the Houston Texans sideways for the Will Anderson deal because it worked out, but that's a concern. Apparently, Les Snead was willing to give up pick 19 and pick 52 to get up to pick 10, but Joe Douglas didn't want to do that. They ended up taking Olaf Ashanu at 11, I believe, is where they ended up getting him when the Vikings traded up to get JJ. And it's pretty, I think you could argue that they I can't remember the details, but maybe they got a better haul from the Jets just move up, or the Vikings move up one spot. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. Brock Bowers and Byron Murphy were on the to-do list for the Rams. They had to settle, quote unquote, for Jared Verse. I think they'll be happy with that. And it didn't cost them anything.
Braden Fisk.
And get Braden Fisk at 52,
yeah,
which I think they wouldn't have had. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's take one more quick break. We'll hit a couple more headlines and we'll get out of here so Rick can make his tea time and shoot that 78 right after this.
Oh my Lord, disaster!
High speeds across the board. Sail GP is back in New York City. On boys. These are the best athletes on water.
All right, I'm going to mix up these headlines a little bit to keep the rookies together. But let's start with Anthony Richardson. He's had his shoulder looked at multiple times by trainers. He's obviously coming off that shoulder surgery from last year that cut his season short. Sort of a freak injury. It wasn't like he was doing anything out of the norm. Had taken a good number of hits up to the point that he got hurt. Are you starting to get worried if you're a GM or you're like, okay, it's just
no,
he's fine. Okay.
Please, yeah, everybody's overreacting because there's nothing to There's nothing to react to. So it's a precautionary. It's probably part of his program. They gave him a day off just to make sure he's fine and dandy. I read an article where he and the receivers are going to have their own mini camp coming up here in a couple weeks, wherever they get together to get ready for training camp. So I wouldn't be concerned at all about this.
Okay. Well, if you're not concerned, I'm not going to be concerned. Oh my gosh. I just realized, maybe you've looked. Do you know who the backup is in Indianapolis?
Yeah. Joe Flacco.
Joe Flacco. That's great. That's right. Because the Browns have thought about keeping him, or there's a whole thing there. All right, good. Well, you're fine. You got two of the strongest arms in the NFL. Anthony will be fine. Rick Spielman. Next up, Kamari Lassiter, their second round pick, impressing at Texans camp. I thought he was a first round talent until he ran to the 4.6s, and then I got a little scared. Is this going to be a Brian Branch situation?
It could be, because there was no question about his football ability and his instincts as a DB. It was about his long speed. And I think they're playing him or lining him up in the slot, I believe.
I think so.
So that'll be what they did with Brian Branch, because the football intelligence and the instincts are critical at that place. And when you watched him on tape coming out of Georgia, there's no question about his ball hawking skills or his instincts. And he is a physical, aggressive hitter as well, which is a critical factor to be a part of or to be at that position in the slot, because you're going to have to run support. So everything he has done positively when we looked at the tape in college is showing up in these OTAs and minicamp.
So it feels like the Bears are the 2023 Houston Texans in terms of their potential trajectory. And comparing these two defenses now, is it crazy to say the Houston Texans might have as good a defense or maybe even a little bit better than Chicago?
Yeah, because how aggressive they were. And I'm, again, going off my recall. And the one thing I'm not good at anything, but I usually can recall things that happen.
I'm staring at the depth chart if you want me to help you out.
Yeah, well, I know they went out and signed Danielle Hunter. So to steal him with Will Anderson, they're two pretty good edge rushers coming off the opposite ends. And who are you going to take out? You have to slide your protection to one or the other. So, and then with Lassiter coming in and some of did they sign a safety as well?
They drafted Kalen Book. They have Jimmy Ward there. Jalen Petrie still there.
Right.
Derek Stingley when he's healthy. They have CJ Henderson, the former first round pick.
Yeah. So I think that the way that DeMeco Ryans has had success on defense, and even last year, I thought they were not a bad defense at all.
Nope.
And DeMeco Ryans, to me, should have been up for, or was a candidate for Coach of the Year, especially a rookie coach coming in. You know he's going to have that defense humming, and everything they else did with the trade to Stephon Diggs. I wouldn't be surprised if Houston makes a push to go after, the Kansas Cities and the Cincinnati Bengals and all the favorites in the AFC to go compete this year, not only to win the AFC South, but to actually make a little run in the playoffs.
Man, if this team went to the Super Bowl, that would be.
Don't forget Joe Mixon, if I'm not mistaken. They added him to the backfield as well.
Absolutely. Joe Mixon. And I don't know if Dameon Pierce was hurt last year. He didn't have a Their offensive line struggled to run the ball at times, but and Tank Dell, the reports are that he's healthy. He obviously broke his lower leg, and I think he got shot in this offseason, but he's recovered from that. So there's a lot of reasons for optimism. They got Kate Stover. I forgot about that. My goodness. It's going to be fun. All right. Another hypothetical for you.
Great. Yeah.
It's not really hypothetical. I think I know the answer. Put yourself in the shoes of Joe Douglas. The Aaron Rodgers stuff, he's not showing up. Do you care, or do you have to just block it out of your mind?
I care if there was no communication, but I'm sure there was communication before Aaron Rodgers said, "Hey, I have a personal issue that's very important to me that I want to be there."
Yeah.
He was there. If he wasn't there through the whole off-season program and missed mandatory minicamp, then yes, that's an issue. But he was there during all the OTAs. And if something came up where he had made if he made plans before the OTA and minicamp schedule actually came out, he may have already told them before, once the minicamp schedule came out, that might have been discussed 3 months ago, that, hey, I'm not going to be at the mandatory minicamp. I will be here for all the OTAs, but I have to do this during the mandatory minicamp wherever he is. I don't know if you know where he went or what he had to do.
I know.
But it was something that he felt was important. But you're talking about a 41-year-old quarterback who's a future Hall of Famer. Do you think missing 2 days of mandatory minicamp is going to set them back? Absolutely not.
Yeah. It's not like it's whatever, CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson taking time off in year 2 just to go to Lollapalooza. Is that still a thing?
I don't know. What is Lollapalooza?
Used to be a get together of bands outdoors, started in the mid 90s. So I think I'm dating myself. But the point is, right, it doesn't matter. Even though he only played 4 snaps last year, he's still Aaron Rodgers. I think you know what to expect.
And because they did fine him. At least it sounded like in the media that they fined him for missing the mandatory minicamp. So you kept to your business principles and, hey, I understand this, but we're going to still fine you for this. And if it was okay, don't worry about it. I'm making $40 million a year anyway. This is more important than whatever amount of money I'm going to be fined. So, but yeah, absolutely. Again, New York media, major market, things got to get reported. Things are slow during the off season. Aaron Rodgers doesn't show up for 2 days of mandatory minicamp, but he was there the whole off season. We got to make a story of it.
And we're talking about it. All right, let's talk about something more on the field related. Your former team, the Vikings, are moving former Patriots first-round pick, N'Keal Harry, the wide receiver, to tight end. And before I get your thoughts on that, I have a list of a couple names. Do you have any former wide receivers that moved to tight ends and had any level of success? I have 4 names that I scribbled down here.
Go ahead. I did not do my homework on this.
Devin Funchess.
Okay.
Out of Michigan, played at Carolina for a little bit.
Yeah.
J.J. Arcega-Whiteside struggled. The Stanford wide receiver struggled as a second-round pick of the Eagles. They moved into wide receiver. Yep. I don't think he's in the league anymore. Elijah Higgins, who we talked about last year during the draft process, was a wide receiver at Stanford. Yeah. Played with my guy, Michael Wilson.
When Michael Wilson played.
But he got drafted by the Dolphins, but he ended up playing for Arizona last year. Higgins did. He had 14 catches for 163 and a touchdown, so he did get some run as a tight end. And then, guy just retired, went to Georgia Tech. Darren Waller, wide receiver, and he was an outstanding tight end in the NFL. So, N'Keal Harry's thing for me coming out was that he wasn't necessarily that explosive, and never was able to get separation, and it just didn't work out for him because of that. But he's thick. He reminds me a little bit of like Juwan Johnson and that sort of player. I get the Juwans mixed up. There's one in New Orleans and one in San Francisco. Can he be that sort of player, or is he an inline guy?
I think that with today's game and these tight ends that are coming out in the draft, we all, put him in a category of pass catching tight ends that can't run block. But the way offenses are trying to create mismatches by moving these bigger body receivers to tight end, they can fulfill a role. I was thinking, who was a tight end? Was there a tight end in New Orleans that got moved.
Juwan Johnson played at Tennessee, or he played at Oregon, I think, and then he's now in New Orleans. I'm looking it up now because I always get him confused. And there is Juwan Jennings is the wide receiver for San Francisco. They're both big bodied guys. But
Right.
Juwan Johnson's listed as a tight end now for the Saints, and he played, let me double check. He played at Oregon. So he's a Penn State transfer.
Wasn't there a
Oregon.
kid out of Texas that was a big receiver? I'm just trying to go through my Rolodex that got moved. Had 2 names for a last name. God,
I don't know.
St. John or something like that. Come on.
St. John, I don't know.
No, there was a big receiver that came out of Texas that played with New Orleans. I believe they got moved. Little Humphrey.
Oh, yes, Jordan Little Humphrey.
There you go.
Humphrey Jordan. What is it? Yeah, him.
Yeah, he got moved from receiver to tight end as well. God, am I good?
We had an old man moment there. I think Marcus Colson was a tight end at Hofstra, and he moved outside, so he may have gone the other way.
Yeah, I don't remember what he played at Hofstra. But the point is that there is a role for these type of players if they're not explosive enough to play outside as a receiver, that maybe if they're more than willing as a blocker, at least to get in the way and give some effort, that they can carve out a role.
Yeah, we had our old man moment there. But it's funny you say that because I remember this was back in 2011.
You didn't have him on your original list. I had to come up with that on my own.
Yeah. I still don't remember his full name. There's a Humphrey, there's a Little, and there's a Jordan in there. The order, I can't remember which the order is. But you're right, the Texas receiver. But it's funny, back in 2011, I remember going to CBS Sports headquarters down in Manhattan prior to the season starting and talking to Shannon Sharp, who used to be on NFL Today, because this was the time where the conversation was maybe Tim Tebow moves to tight end. And I remember him saying, look, you can look like Tim Tebow, but you got to want to be in line and have to block those defensive ends and block those outside linebackers because that's not something everyone wants to do. So that's the conversation that you got to figure out. And look, you've probably seen this a lot. When your job is on the line and your team is asking you to do something, you're not going to half-ass it. I would imagine N'Keal Harry's trying to learn how to be a good blocker if he's not good enough already, and he can catch the football, but the other stuff, the position change is what's going to have to require a lot of his effort, I would imagine, of these next few weeks.
Yeah. And again, until the pads come on, you're not going to know that.
Yeah, that's also true. All right, one last thing, and then we'll get out of here. Some teams have players that are holding out. And on a scale of 1 to 10, you can just tell me how concerned you are. 10 being the most concerned, 1 being you don't care, and you're mad that I asked you the question. CeeDee Lamb.
I'm concerned a little bit. I would be
like
concerned.
6?
Like 7.
Oh, okay. You are concerned. Well, are you concerned because you got to pay Micah and you got to pay Dak?
That's why I'm concerned.
Yeah, I don't know how that math is going to work out. All right. I think Brandon Ayuk either tweeted this or it came out somewhere on the internet that he doesn't think the team wants to give him what he's worth, something to that effect. Brandon Ayuk, how concerned are you about that?
Not as concerned because I think he'll come in and play and then end up getting a contract somewhere else next year. But
Have you said previously that you don't think he gets traded?
I don't think he'll get traded, but who knows? If there's an injury during training camp or something like that, someone thinks that they have a roster that is competitive enough to compete for a Super Bowl, they make a move. I had to do that with Sam Bradford. I wasn't going to trade for Sam Bradford, but I didn't see Teddy Bridgewater going down. We had a really good football team at the time, so you had to do what you had to do. So you always got to you can't predict those things.
And you were between a rock and a hard place in terms of the compensation.
Yeah, I had no choice.
Yeah, no choice. All right, what about Hassan Reddick, who is he's still 29. He'll turn 30 in September. New Jets linebacker. He's no-showed. That seems a little different than the Aaron Rodgers situation if you're Joe Douglas.
Yeah, because he wasn't there, I don't believe, through all the OTAs either.
Yeah.
So that's something, if you make that trade, you want to make sure that the contract doesn't become an issue. So it'll be interesting to see if they can resolve that. I don't think he would hold out just because he got traded to a major market.
Yeah.
But I know that the 11th hour doesn't come up to right before training camp or right before that first regular season game.
All right, Trevor Lawrence got paid last week, $55 million. That's a lot, but that's what you have to do. Tua Tagovailoa, is he going to get a new deal?
He'll get a new deal done. No concern with that.
He's not taking less than 55 and a penny, right?
I don't know. I'm sure they're working through the problem now.
It's a problem for Stephen Ross. It's not a problem for Tua
Yes.
if he gets it. Do you think if you're starting a team tomorrow, I know what you're going to say. If you're starting a team tomorrow based on the productivity in the NFL, are you taking Trevor or are you taking Tua?
Trevor.
I just don't understand why people keep hopping on this Trevor train. All right. I get it. That's it. I mentioned the mailbag. We'll do the mailbag later. Rick's got things to do.
I'm trying to avoid enjoying my week's vacation by working on what is that? Workation, they call it?
Yeah. Are you playing golf every day?
Yes.
How's your game? How's it going?
I played a very hard course and actually hit the ball pretty good.
Oh, good.
Yesterday.
And the Midwest courses are different than the Florida courses. Right?
Yes, they are. Yeah, the grass is totally different.
There is grass. No, there's water, but it's not like ocean.
No, it's not like hitting from water to water to island green to island green.
All right, Rick, that's it. Episode 164 is in the books. Enjoy your golf game, sir. Thanks as always to my guy Rick. Thanks to Harry for producing. Thanks, guys who watch and listen and comment. Have a great weekend. We'll be back next week for another podcast. See you then.